the model, pretty much, except for one that's in the galleons, are from that week 6 packet. Can you see the week 6 packet? Give me a yes in the chat if you can see it. Okay, cool. Good, thank you. So we have some key concepts today.
I'm in a poetry class.
One of them.
So if you're interested in poetry, you should stick around.
That's the comparison of one item, a person, place, object, animal, or idea, etc., to another in a way that transforms the item or asks the reader to see the item differently. Some of us, maybe, at least when I was in like high school, there was a big deal about distinguishing between a metaphor versus a simile.
Can you hear the Zoom class?
Poetry land,
and can you hear me?
That's not a very important distinction. Similes, which
if you'd use the chat,
like an ad,
I'd love
are
you.
just seen as a kind of metaphor. So there's no, in the way that we'll analyze today, no meaningful difference between saying the boy was like a puppy versus the boy was a puppy versus the boy wagged his tail and jumped around wildly. You know what I mean? Those are both all ways of comparing, and it doesn't necessarily matter which one we're using. Does that sound good?
Hold potential inappropriate comments. Allow all comments.
All right. I linked in the packet to a particular Twitter thread by Jericho Brown, who wrote some
Where are you from?
that we, I think, really liked in the lineation packet.
Are you actually watching this?
He's certainly like a major American.
Am I entertaining or pretty?
And the thread is cool. It's about two terms for poetry, the tenor and the vehicle. Sorry, not for poetry, but for metaphor. So I will go over it just really briefly in case it's interesting to you. And you can click on the link if you're interested in reading it yourself. But so when we talk about the two things compared in a metaphorical structure, there are names for these. One is the tenor and one is the vehicle. If our main item of focus is, his example is a linebacker in football. We say the linebacker was a bear. We're not writing about a bear. We're writing about the linebacker. But the bear is the vehicle that transforms the way we see the linebacker. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
That there is sort of a primary thing that we're trying to understand, that another element that is the vehicle of transformation. So are you saying bear is the linebacker vehicle, or the vehicle is the bear? Because that's how we're saying it. Vehicle is the bear. Okay. Let's type that in the chat.
The line break is a bear. Terror equals line break and vehicle equals bear.
And that's because the linebacker is the primary item, and then the bear is the means of transformation. And obviously we could use all sorts of bear-like language to describe the linebacker. I'm trying to think of some bear-like language.
Please put something in the chat.
I can't.
I just want to see that it works.
It's just ferocity that transforms the linebacker, that idea. So this idea may come back to you. If it feels useful to you to break it down in that way, I would urge you to read the thread. So that's just metaphor the general structure. Sometimes there can be in a poem a controlling metaphor, which is when the metaphor creates the poem's main progress. It's kind of an overall metaphor. We're not particularly going to talk about metonymy, I don't think, but we will talk a little bit about cliches. Cliches are phrases or opinions, and sometimes even just a setting that is overused. And, you know, depending on the reader and depending on the values that the reader holds, cliches are often thought to show a lack of originality or a lack of original thought. However, most cliches began as fresh metaphors that have just been overused through time. So we'll talk a little bit about that. I'm going to go through the packet. We won't get to everything, but I'm going to go through and talk a little bit about images and metaphors. This is a short poem by Bill Knott, Death. Going to sleep, I cross my hands on my chest. They will place my hands like this. It will look as though I am flying into myself. So this is a really simple image-based poem where Bill Knott gives us the image of how hands are crossed on the chest at a funeral with a body. And for him, in this moment, it means it will look as though I am flying into myself. And the title suggests that he's making a point there about death. For him in this poem, death is a flight into oneself. I don't want to spend too much time with this, but it's a poem that I often come back to in my own writing practice when I think about images and how to make them mean something, because it's so short. It's like all the moves of an image-based poem in just 3 lines. And if this is something you're working on, that could even be something you can practice.
Say something if you're feeling the vibe. Say something. Baby, don't be so shy. Say something.
I want to do a couple of the controlling metaphor poems. Excuse me. So one is A Wild Iris. Louise Glück just won a Nobel Prize recently. And this is from the book of the same title, which is one of her most famous works.
Baby, don't be so shy. Say something.
Book, The Wild Iris, she writes from a perspective of a flower or a plant, and a different flower or plant in each poem. So she's writing in the voice of the plant. So think for a minute about an iris. It grows all winter long as a bulb, right? And then in the spring, it sends up shoots and it blossoms. So that's the overall shape that she's working with. I'm going to read this one a couple times. And the metaphor, I will just say now, is an overall one, as she inhabits this flower's voice and inhabits this flower's reality. See what else you find in the poem. See how what you notice about the way either image works or where this comparison is happening in the poem. There's no right answer to this. I just want you to kind of track the idea as I read it a couple times. The Wild Iris. At the end of my suffering, there was a door. Hear me out. That which you call death I remember. Overhead, noises, branches of the pine shifting, then nothing. The weak sun flickered over the dry surface. It is terrible to survive as consciousness buried in the dark earth. Then it was over. That which you fear being a soul and unable to speak, ending abruptly, the stiff earth bending a little. And what I took to be birds darting in low shrubs. You who do not remember passage from the other world, I tell you I could speak again. Whatever returns from oblivion returns to find a voice. From the center of my life came a great fountain, deep blue shadows on azure seawater.
Whatever returns from oblivion returns to find a
I'm
voice.
going to read it one more time.
I love that.
Feel free to type in the chat during or after. The wild iris. At the end of my suffering, there was a door. Hear me out. That which you call death, I remember. Overhead noises, branches of the pine shifting, then nothing. The weak sun flickered over the dry surface. It is terrible to survive as consciousness buried in the dark earth. Then it was over. That which you fear, being a soul and unable to speak, ending abruptly, the stiff earth bending a little. And what I took to be birds darting in low shrubs. You who do not remember passage from the other world, I tell you I could speak again. Whatever returns from oblivion returns to find a voice. From the center of my life came a great fountain, deep blue shadows on azure seawater. And I'll get back there. Tell me your thoughts. How's it working? How does the metaphor work? The whole poem is kind of the metaphor, right? Yes. So let's think about the parts of the metaphor. Okay, so Parisa, you were feeling it. Overhead noise, it gives us some visuals. Yes. So if you were a bulb buried in the earth, you would hear some overhead noise, wouldn't you? You might hear things going on above you. And what I took to be birds darting in low shrubs. The iris bulb can't see that stuff. I notice a recurring theme of speak, sound, yes. I'm looking for this. What is the metaphor of? Okay, so it seems to me that we're comparing, this in some sense, the human and the iris, right? So the iris says, hear me out. Back to Haley's idea of the hear, speak, sound theme. Hear me out. That which you call death, I remember. So the bulb, okay, I'm going to follow up with you, Riley, in a second. The bulb is talking about what it feels like to go into this deep winter and then be reborn. So that could have a parallel in a lot of human experiences. So, Riley says, maybe this speaker has depression, like they're stuck in their fog, but the world is still going on without them. That's certainly how I read it. People go through periods of winter and renewal, right? And it seems to me that some kind of experience like that, some kind of experience of
Use
going
the
into
chat.
a dormant state or a form of death without fully dying, like depression, I would say, is being compared here to the state of the iris. So you might say that if we take Riley's reading of it,
Use the chat.
And
I just
some
want to
kind
know
of
that it
renewal.
works. All you have to do is type one letter. And if you have and I don't see it, I'm sorry. Are you enjoying this?
Tenor, typing it in the chat. And then the iris, the life cycle of the iris, would be the vehicle.
Depression and coming out of it equals tenor.
Does that make sense?
Depression.
As a way of analyzing it? Yeah, okay. I guess. Okay, we'll keep going. Sort of. So in the Twitter thread, Jericho Brown talks about how if he wants to write about his life, it's like too big a topic, and maybe he doesn't know what he wants to say about it, but he does want to write about a tree. Yeah, Christina, it sounds like a rebirth almost, yes. He does want to write about a tree, and he does want to write about a particular kind of tree. I think he's living in the South, a myrtle. And he can write about the tree in such a way that he's actually writing about himself and his life. And he can do that because he already understands the tree. He understands its parts, he understands what's beautiful about it. But his own life, in his telling, he doesn't necessarily understand yet. So that's the reason to write.
If I should come upon a house lonely in the West Texas desert.
Maybe the tenor is a topic that is too big or that you don't yet understand.
One person.
But the vehicle
watching.
can give it shape.
Let's go for two. Tell one of your friends about it.
We're going to look at another one of these. The controlling metaphor one. I don't believe it was that. Was it poppies? Hang on. I'm going to look back at the assignment really quickly to see.
Tell me your favorite music
Which one
group.
of these I gave as the example of the controlling. Thanks for your patience. Oh, okay. It is the Natalie Diaz poem. Okay. Similar idea, actually. Let me get back where I'm going. Hope I can. Trying to. Okay. So the Natalie Diaz poem is, if I should come upon you lonely in the West Texas desert. Let's think about the two parts of the metaphor here. I'm probably going to read this one and stop in the middle and explain it because it's a little longer. I will swing my lasso of headlights across your front porch. Right here, we can tell what both parts of the metaphor are. So what has headlights, folks?
Cars,
Cars.
planes,
So I'm going to guess that maybe the car is the vehicle in this poem. Ha ha ha. Car is actually the vehicle, but in the metaphor, it's the vehicle too. So I'm going to suggest that maybe she's going to be writing about a car in order to get at something human. That she can, I think it will be clear what it is by the end of the poem. I will swing my lasso of headlights across your front porch. Let it drop like a rope of knotted light at your feet. While I put the car in park, you will tie and tighten the loops of light around your waist, and I will be there with the other end wrapped 3 times around my hip, torn with loneliness. Reel me in across the glow-throbbing sea of green thread, blue stem prickly poppy, the white inflorescence of yucca bells, up the dust-lit stairs into your arms. If you say to me, this is not your new house, but I am your new home, I will enter the door of your throat, hang my last lariat in the hallway, build my altar of best books on your bedside table, turn the lamp on and off, on and off, on and off. I will lie down in you, eat my meals at the red table of your heart. Each steaming bowl will be just right. I will eat it all up, break all your chairs to pieces,